Good morning and welcome to Ag Talk in the Raw. All right, so today I'm going to talk about the summer, the growing season from the start to now. I'm not quite finished with corn yet. We're getting close. Did really good in the beginning, and now that I'm in the last part, I kind of started with what I planted first. So as I planted the corn, I'm going in the same sequence. To be quite honest with you. So for the direction that I started in the spring with planting corn is how I'm ending up. So the last farms that I planted will be the last farms that I harvested. And so that's not really what this is about, but I'm going to start there. Anyway, so this past winter, winter 22, brought a lot of compost home, brought a lot of lime home, did a lot of things to really have the best shot at having a bumper crop in what we for the year, a bumper crop of beans and a bumper crop of corn. And I learned a lot over the course of the spring and the summer, as to what I did right and what I did wrong and what I will not be doing again, and what I'm hoping other people will see as beneficial to their operations, or just that guy's a fool, that sort of a thing. So as you know, I'm talking a lot about regenerative ag and soil health, which is it's kind of like taboo in today's day and age, and I didn't think that it should be. It really shouldn't be taboo in today's day and age because, well, it's actually pretty simple to do. It takes a little dedication. It takes less money than commercial fertilizers. You will still be using commercial fertilizers. You will just be reducing those inputs. And I can, talk about that a little bit. So what I'm going to say here, excuse me, is that when I started this spring, putting down the compost and the lime, I only have a limited amount of time and manpower or resources to get this all done. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to do 650 acres of corn, and I'm going to do 450 acres of soybeans, which will give me 1,100 acres of row crops. The rest will be hay. Well, that's great. My program was get as much lime down and as much compost on the soybeans. All the soybeans would have lime and compost, because if you don't know, soybeans are a calcium whore. They love calcium. Calcium. And I'm not talking like, pH adjusting calcium. I'm talking like calcium, gypsum, calcium that is calcium. It's calcium sulfate is what gypsum is. If you have a source for calcium or gypsum, soybeans like both sulfur and calcium. Wheat does as well. Corn does. Basically all row crops do. They just love calcium. So if your pHs are good and you don't want to use like dolomitic lime or high cal lime, like I'm using high cal lime. I don't need magnesium because I get it in the compost that I'm receiving from the mushroom barns, and so you just kind of have to do some soil tests and get yourself to a base, and that's the whole premise for starting regenerative ag. You can't start regenerative ag with a piece of land that has been, in all essence, worn out. So can you wear a piece of ground out? I'm going to tell you no, you can't wear a piece of ground out. You can make it sick. And I think there's a vast amount of land in this country that is very sick. It's just, does it grow good crops? Yes, it does. That sick land can grow good crops. Are you making a profit margin like this, or are you making a profit margin like that? So that's where you have to look at your land. You want to take him downstairs because he's being like really unruly.
I can't do anything anyway. If I run, I know what he's going to do if I run.
No, he's not. Take him downstairs. Put him in that room with you, and he can do his thing. Me and my wife are having a little discussion about a little bad boy who needs to
Come on, let's go.
be a good boy. He's being mean. Yeah. Go with your mother.
Leave the light on. We're going downstairs.
So anyway, you can take a piece of sick ground and recover it by doing a few very simple things. And once you do those simple things and you go down the regenerative ag path, as a lot of people call it, or their journey. I call it a path. Most people call it a regenerative ag journey. It's not a journey. Well, I guess, if you want to look at it that way, it's just the path. We all take paths in lives, and life is nothing but choices, good choices and bad choices. So, and I'm not saying that anybody's choice in agriculture is good or bad. I'm just saying that you can make more money in one way than you do the other. And this system does work on all soils, all areas. If you do not believe that, you are not ever going to be successful in regenerative ag or anything else that you do. And the reason I say that is you can make sand topsoil, beautiful topsoil. Beautiful, beautiful topsoil. So you can search the internet, and coastal storms are what really, really show what sand can be turned into. So on the internet, there's a few videos that I've seen, and they're coastal storms, and there's this beautiful green lawn, and a coastal storm came and undercut this lawn. Or grass. It was a grass field. It wasn't really a lawn, but it was a grassland, and it was nice grass. And about a foot and a half or more of that sand was the most beautiful black, and I'm telling you, black soil you ever wanted to see. And then underneath that foot and a half of black soil was yellow beach sand. Now, what was the difference? You can say, okay, well, if somebody said to me, hey, I want you to farm that field over there, it's pure yellow beach sand, and you're going to farm it, and you're going to have to grow a crop on there. A lot of guys would say, that's just sand. What am I going to do with that? Well, there's a lot of places like down on the eastern shore of Maryland, Virginia, and Delaware, Delmarva, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, that they're farming just sand, and they have sand knolls. Eastern Shore farmer will talk about the sand hills in his area. He's down in Maryland on the Eastern Shore, and I've cut corn fodder on his ground, the most abrasive shit you ever want to see. I mean, it's sand, and if he was to take his digger, track hoe, bucket loader, whatever it is, dig down 2 feet, he would be in yellow beach sand. Probably water would come up under that too, because they are. I stood in fields where the tide was coming in and the water came up through the sand. It was the craziest thing I'd ever seen and experienced. And that was in 2019. I had a great time down on the Eastern Shore, worked with a lot of good guys, farmers down there, had a wonderful time. Everybody was friendly with the exception of one. He was all right, but it's just not my cup of tea. I could work for him, but he was probably the most finicky guy I ever met in my life. But whatever. Anyway, regenerative ag does work on these areas. You just need to learn how to make that sand a topsoil. And you can search the internet, and actually, Eastern Shore Farmer has made some steps in the right direction. He has put down hairy vetch, and I'm really anxious to see what this hairy vetch is going to do. And I'm hoping that he rolls it out he terminates it with his vertical tillage machine. The tine bars need to be disengaged for this, but if he pulls the tine bars up and then just cuts it and lays it flat with the rolling baskets on the back of his vertical tillage machine, he can plant straight through that. It'll terminate it, plant straight through that, and probably be very, very happy with the results. And that's really part of this thing. So anyways, I'm getting ahead of I'm putting the cart in front of the horse here. So this spring, I decided that I was going to do this regenerative ag thing. So I brought my compost in, I brought my lime in, I spread it all out, with the exception of a few piles. I just didn't have quite enough time to get it all on. which is fine. You know, I'm okay with that. It's still there. I still have it. The lime, I've only got about 10 tons left, and I have a spot for those. It's 7:40 in the morning, so I'm going to have to get moving here. But okay, so we did all that stuff, spread it out. I did not purchase the VT. That is my main regret for 2022, is that I didn't purchase the VT in the spring. Because if I would have purchased my vertical tillage machine in the spring, I would have fertilized the hay. I did this about a week before I was ready to plant. Fertilized the hay, allowed that hay to grab that nitrogen, okay? A lot of guys are like, oh my God, the hay took the nitrogen and you've lost all your nitrogen. No, stop listening to the fertilizer plant. You got to stop listening to that. So what I did, I fertilized it, then I planted through it, okay? And then 3 days after that, I terminated it with glyphosate or Roundup. Okay, so I used the wrong nozzles on my sprayer. That was a mistake that I made. I used a large droplet nozzle instead of a fine droplet nozzle. I will not be making that mistake again. A fine droplet nozzle is where I want to be. And, you know, that will actually coat more of the plant, allow more of the intake of the glyphosate into the plant, allowing it to die faster. So it took 2 doses of Roundup. Roundup was $62 a gallon this year for the first go round, and $48 a gallon for this, $46 a gallon for the second go round. I used a lot of glyphosate. I didn't exceed the limit, but I used a lot of glyphosate because I did spray technically 2,200 acres with glyphosate. I went over that ground more times than I care to talk about. So anyway, so what I did was I allowed that nitrogen to get up into the hay, and then that made the hay really healthy, which is one of the things that made it harder to kill it. So when I planted, I was a little anxious to get it in the ground because it was getting late. It was getting towards, May 10, May 15 in that area. May 12th, I think, was the first we started. And the ground was cold and damp, and we had rain. We had a lot of rain. It rained, and then, it just was cold and damp. It was hard for the seed. It all came up okay. It just was, kind of yellow. Damp clay soils make it harder for the corn to take up the nutrients that it needed. But what I had done with planting through it was I damaged the hay by driving over it and cutting it with the row units. And you're probably wondering why that makes a difference. Well, it does make a difference. I tried to mimic what a cow or a herd of animals would do to this hay crop. They trample it, they bite it, they damage it, and then what happens with that hay crop is it turns around and says, hey, I'm damaged. I need help to repair myself. And it exudes certain carbohydrates into the soil, sugars, carbohydrates, It signals to the microbiology in the soil to get the nutrients that it needs to repair itself. So, and that happens within minutes of being damaged. It's just like a triggered response. It is adrenaline in your body. If you don't understand what that is, you've never been excited. It's adrenaline for the plant. So that plant gets damaged, it shoots that adrenaline into the soil to signal the microbiology to get it the nutrients that it needs to repair itself. If you think I'm bullshitting you, just do some research and you'll understand. So with that, when I put down my, so it did that. I planted through, and then 3 days later, I went through and I terminated the hay crop. Now, I put down the secret sauce. The secret sauce is food for the microbiology. It is also an awesome surfactant. It will cause it to stick. You can put 2,4-D in with this thing. You can put dicamba in with this stuff. It will not drift. It will not do anything. I learned that on my own. It wasn't something that was told to me. It's like, all right, I'm going to use dicamba, and I've got soybeans right here, dicamba. They're dicamba beans. But there were pokeberries and other plants that would have been damaged by the volatility of dicamba, and they weren't. So that pretty much led me to believe that this secret sauce that I'm using binds it and holds it. It doesn't allow it to become volatile. And I talked to the guy the agronomist that I learned this stuff from, and he's like, oh yeah, he says that is probably the best surfactant you're ever going to get, and it will not allow that dicamba 2,4-D to be volatile and go off into the atmosphere and kill somebody's grapes or conventional soybeans down the road a little ways. So that was an added benefit to that stuff. So when I terminated the grass and used my secret sauce, it held the glyphosate in place, and it did its thing. And as the plants were dying, from the glyphosate, they no longer signal the microbiology to feed the dying cover crop. So that's why I used the secret sauce, to continue to feed the microbiology in the soil until the corn crop could actually get enough root system underneath it to support the microbiology. And I sprayed that stuff on twice on a lot of this stuff. I was spraying corn and soybeans. I screwed up a load of Roundup, and what happened was it washed the Bicep Magnum out of the tank, and I scorched 55 acres of soybeans. And when I say I scorched them, I mean I turned those poor soybeans into yellow, twisted up mess. They were dead. So I made that executive decision to go ahead and put corn in behind, through the soybeans. Not a problem. Those beans were yellow and dying. Most of them only had a leaf left on them. A leaf or no leaves. They were just a stem. That's how bad they were. And, okay, so what? I put corn into it. I come back in. Those soybeans, I'm not even going to bother to kill the soybeans because they will feed the corn plant. Well, the corn came up in rows, perfect rows, beautiful corn coming up. They were deep green. They had whatever was going on. I put 160 units of nitrogen down on that corn. Well, when I put the 160 units of nitrogen on the corn, that kicked the soybeans into gear. Like, literally woke them up, brought them back to life, and that is what I learned about burning soybeans. If they still have some life into them, go throw 60 units of nitrogen onto them or so, and it'll bring them back to life in a normal year. Well, we didn't have a normal year then. All of a sudden, the faucet shut off, and we didn't have rain for like 18 days, and then it was like 0.3 of an inch, and then we didn't have rain for another 12 days, and then it was like a couple of tenths of an inch. Showers here and there that missed us, and intense heat, 100-degree days, 101-degree days, 99, 97-degree days, clear-ass skies, not a cloud in the sky, and it was just a scorching hot summer. The longest we went without rain on those fields, was 22 days, and then we got like 2 inches of rain, 1.9 inches of rain, and that made the soybeans grow, and the corn was so damaged by that intense heat, most of it never got over 2 feet tall. So that was it. I had a succotash field, and I didn't know what the hell to do with it. So I talked to the guys at the feed mill. They said, yeah, you can combine that with a grain head. We'll buy it. And I was like, oh, okay. So the soybeans looked as though they would produce 30-plus bushels of beans to the acre. And the corn looked about like it was going to produce 50 or 60 bushels of corn to the acre. And I said, well, what are you going to pay me for them? He said, well, if you bring it in here, we'll pay you for corn. And we're going to pay me for soybeans. We're going to pay me for corn. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense to me. I think I should get something a little better than that. I mean, if corn is $7.50, they got a fancy pants cleaner over there that would clean the corn right out of those soybeans, and they would end up with, I don't know, 3 times 5, 1,500 bushels of soybeans at $14 and God knows what a bushel at that point. And I was like, it didn't sound right to me. So I just combined the corn and vertically tilled in the soybeans. Just VT'd them in. That's it, done. VT'd them in, planted wheat on them, and it looks good. So that was a lesson that I learned. If you have soybeans that you burned, throw some nitrogen onto them. And, in a rain shower, they do just fine. And that's what really would have happened. I had soybeans, no lie, in the damper spots on those fields. They were chest high. They were like vines because they had all that nitrogen to make them grow. And it was like, well, there we go. We got nitrogen, we got soybeans, and the corn, which needed more moisture. The soybeans took the moisture away from the corn took the moisture away from the beans. It was a disaster. So, yeah, whatever. I did okay, though. I got 80 plus bushels of corn off of it. I VT'd in 30, 40 bushel beans. I planted wheat. The wheat's looking good, and we're doing okay. So that's what happened. The wheat dried up. So I had the fields that I did not put compost and lime on them. And I'm telling you right now, without the compost and the lime, there is as much as 100 bushel difference from where I put compost and lime. I was sitting on top of the hog, man. I was getting fat on the hog. I had 180, 190, 200, 160, 140 bushel corn coming off of these farms. And I'm like, man, if I could just keep this up, I'm gonna be wondering what the hell to do with my money. That's how it was, because I had reduced all of my inputs from the fertilizer plant. So it's like, okay, we're going along. And then I got into the first farm that was really bad, the pineapple farm. It had compost, it had lime, but it didn't have rain. There were 2 showers that I had gotten where the succotash was that I didn't get over there. And that was a 43 acre field. I ended up with 102 bushel to the acre off of that. And I thought, oh my God, this is bad. But I still made money, I still did all right. And then I got into the corn that didn't have any compost and no lime. And now I'm like, 50, 60 bushel corn. That's it. 50, 60 bushel corn. So what I was getting 180, 140, 160, 200, 190 corn on is now being drugged down by 50 bushel corn. And there's a lot of it. I've got some fields that are zero bushels. Sad to say, but they're 0 bushels. So when you take, I'm going to say there's going to be 23 acres, 25 acres, it's 0. So you take 25, that should have been 140 minimum, 25 acres, and you take that 140 out of it drags your average down. Fortunately, I only needed 167, or I needed 67 bushel at $5.25 a bushel to break even on those fields, because it was, only 160 units of nitrogen and the glyphosate and Bicep 2 Magnum or whatever it was that I put on with Callisto. That it's fine. So I'm still in profitability even with these reduced yields on ground that didn't have the compost and the lime. So here I am. I'm like, God, I'm going to be planting somewhere around 1,400 acres of corn this coming year. I don't think I'm going to be planting too much soybeans, but I'm going to be planting like more than double the corn that I had this year. So I got to do this, and I don't have to do it. I want to do it. I love growing corn. If you didn't know, I love growing corn. So I'm making the executive decision, that in the spring I have some ground that I am unable to get a cover crop on. But what I'm going to do in the spring is I'm going to put down a cover crop. Oats, cowpeas, or peas, peas and oats, a little buckwheat, a few soybeans. What the heck else was I going to throw in there? Oh, sunflowers. Just a few sunflowers. They don't ever have to make it to maturity. All they do have to do is make a taproot. Get a taproot down and get that going. And I'm going to plant them as early as I can. Sunflowers can take a little bit of, they can't take frost too much, but they can take a little bit of frost, but they'll be protected by the oats. And then they'll all grow up, and then I'll go in and I will fertilize that, VT it, plant through it. That's how I'm going to do it. And I need to do that on something like 400 or 500 acres of ground. 400, I'd say 400 acres. So, yeah, 400 acres. Let's see, 150, that's 300, 350, 300, 350 new acres that I have to do that's barren. And I have to do it on another probably 600 acres that I have to do that on. And that's what I'm going to do. Now you're probably wondering, why are you doing that? Well, you need to keep your soil cool in the heat of the summer. Where I had a good cover of hay that died correctly, that was my best corn. It kept the soil cool. Earthworms were able to do their thing. Moisture was held in. The later planted corn, not so good. And the reason for that is the hay dried the ground out that much further down the line. There's between May 12th and June 15th of planting, that hay, it had stopped raining at that point. That hay had pulled a lot of moisture out of the ground. So it was dry going into the ground. The corn that went in the ground the best, nice closed V's, crumbled sidewalls, everything was good. That corn did the worst because the hay had sucked the moisture out of the ground, and then the faucet got turned off, and it was just a disaster. So it's just going to have to, that's why I want to use cover crops over hay crops. I will be doing that, that's how I'm going to do it. So those are the things that I've learned about planting through hay crops. If you're going to plant through hay, plant through it early. Go into the cover crops a little bit later. Lay those flat. Still fertilizer. Okay, so what do we do for fertilizer? Well, you can't just do nitrogen, right? Well, compost has all the nutrients that you need, and it's already brought into an available form. Okay, most of it's brought into an available form before it ever hits the ground. And all that we need then is a little bit of rain to wash the available nutrients into the soil, the T, as you might say, and all the microbes that are there will go into the soil, become food for other microbes that like to eat them, and that creates organic matter, carbon, and it's just solubles to availables is very important. I don't believe I need to put in any more than 2 tons to the acre. Last year I was very heavy with the compost, and I had a phenomenal, and that word is just coming all the time, a phenomenal response from the compost when we did get rain. The problem was that the stalks stayed green. As a matter of fact, the stalks, even after these frostings, the lower stalks, they're still green. Too much nitrogen. So that nitrogen is there. It was held late in the season by the grass, by that cover crop. It was held there till late in the season, and then as it broke down, it became available to the plant. The plant took it up, and then it made that plant really healthy, which was good for development of the ear and the grain. But it makes it hell to harvest because it kept that plant alive for a long time. So I'm probably going to reduce my nitrogen input versus the compost input, because compost is cheaper than nitrogen. It takes more time to put it on, but I'm probably going to, instead of doing 7 tons to the acre for corn, 7 to 10 tons, I'm probably going to do 3.5 tons to 4 tons to the acre for corn. Put on the cover, live-in cover, and plant green through it, and do what I said I had done this year, and with the twist of the vertical tillage machine. And then I'm only cutting in 1 inch to 1.5 inches with the VT, just enough to cut the roots of the plant, cut the roots of the plant, cut the top of the plant a little bit, and tear it up. Just tear that grass up and give it time to say, hey, I need to recover. And it's like when you mow a field of orchard grass and 2 days later you got 4 or 5 inch shoots. It's like, where did that come from? Well, that was all that energy that was stored in the roots. And when it said, hey, I'm damaged, you gotta you got to help me out here. All those microbes go to work putting nutrient into the soil. If you cut it too low, you cut the heart out of the plant, and then it doesn't have that triggered response. But yeah, when you do it with say the VT, it's going to not hit every plant, but it's going to damage every plant with the roller, and it's going to cause that response for you. It is my mechanical cow, as I've said. 3 days after that, it's going to start to come back up. There's going to be new shoots. It's going to be tender green. There's going to be a lot of available nutrients that are going to be released later in the reproductive stages of those plants. The vegetative stages of those plants, there should be enough nitrogen left over and being broken down and released into the soil, making it from soluble to available to that cash crop. And yeah, we'll go there. So those are the things that I've learned this year in doing regenerative ag. Now, I've caught a lot of criticism over, people saying, I thought you were no-till. Well, tilling the top inch of the soil, yes, it's scratching the top. Yes, I guess you could call it tillage in a minimal sense. But when you're placing a seed at 2 inches to 2¼ inches, that seed is in virgin soil. It's not stirred. You're only scratching the top, right? Or cutting the top. And you're only cutting slots. You're not tearing anything up. Especially in the spring, I'm going to disengage the tine bars so there's no stirring of the soil. It's just going to be straight slots cut in the soil, allowing the soil to dry out just a little bit better and close a little bit better behind the V closing wheels on the corn planters. And, doing what I've explained here that it's going to do. So in the fall, after you take that off, then you engage the tine bars and you stir that top inch and a half of soil to incorporate your cover crop. That's really, really what I need is to incorporate the cover crop with that VT. So that VT, yeah, it cost $93,000. I paid $93,000 for the VT. That's what I paid. Okay, so I wish I'd have bought it in the spring because it would have only been $77,000 for the same thing. But whatever, such is life, and we live, we learn, we move on from our failed thoughts and processes and things like that. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm not going bankrupt. That's the one thing. A lot of people said, "Oh, you're going to have a big sale farming like that." No, not. I'm not. I haven't lost anything. I've gained. I have made money. Don't get me wrong. I have made money. I don't have a $500,000, $750,000 combine to pay for. Well, it's $1 million for a combine. Two heads, and a combine. It's over $1 million for a brand new, biggest combine they make. I believe the X9 1100 John Deere twin rotor combine is $996,000. $996,000. Oh wait, you still have to get that $250,000 folding corn head, and you have to get that $250,000 grain 40-foot grain platform to feed that thing. You can buy a New Holland for $600 to $750. Be under $1 million with your heads, or close to $1 million with your heads. Well, it's still $1 million with your heads. Or you do what I do and keep the old gal running. Got to keep the old gal running. A few kernels on the ground that's shelling out in the head sure beats a $250,000 payment every year for 5 years, and I just don't think that I'm going to benefit by doing that. I don't have enough ground. Well, I do have enough ground to do it. It's just I'm not into it. I would buy 2 older machines and pay a guy $50,000, $60,000 a year to run that equipment in the spring and the fall, and they could have their winters off, if that was the case, and still be money ahead. And I am looking at doing that. There's a CR960 out at Messick's that's 4-wheel drive. Looks like it's in pretty decent shape. I might go and look at that. I don't know. We'd have to make a deal. Do I need a CR960? Probably not. CR940 would do it. I don't need this huge combine to do, more than I can handle coming off the fields, because then it becomes a problem. Oh, my combine is running 1,000 bushels an hour. My dryer only runs 600 bushels an hour in 20% corn. My trucking or my wagons that I use are now obsolete. I need to get a grain cart and another trailer for my truck, and I need more augers and a wet bin and another bin and all this stuff. And, you know, by the time you're done, all those gains that you made on the front side by saving money turn into expenses later on. So to get another combine, it's debatable whether I need it right now. Probably I'll know in the spring when wheat comes out from under any snow cover, if we get any. And that will be just the... that'll just be the long and the short of it. You know, you got to see what you're going to be into before you go and spend all that money. I mean, anybody can walk down to the dealership and take out a note on a, you know, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 combine and heads, or they can just hold off, see what happens, and then go shopping. Yeah, maybe you'll pay another $5,000, you know, because you didn't buy it in the fall when there's an abundance of this equipment out on the market. But if you buy it in the spring when you're looking at a wheat crop that's going to be pretty phenomenal, and you need to get it off in a timely fashion so you can slam corn and soybeans behind it. Now, what I'm going to do, you know, there's a lot of guys who are like, you'll never get corn behind wheat. It's too late in the season. Well, look, again, research in what you can do with wheat to get it off earlier is key here. Now, there's a couple of things you can do. You can go out and you can swath your wheat and wait for a few days and then combine it and then run it through your dryer. But then you're running a lot of material through your combine. Or you can wait until that grain hits 29, 30%, and the stem just below the head is brown. That means that wheat is mature, and it's not going to, there's no more nutrient or water or anything going up to that head. Then you go through with a harvest aid and you spray it. Oh, but you're going to run down the wheat. Yeah, we are. Because that little bit of wheat that I run down, that's okay. What is it? 3 bushels to the acre? 4 or 5 bushels to the acre? Just say it's 10 bushels to the acre, which it isn't. Just 3 or 4 bushels to the acre getting run over as you're spraying it. You've already got tram lines in anyway because you've sprayed it, you know, with nitrogen or whatever. Yeah. So you've already set your tram lines. Go through and turn it. You turn it with a harvest aid. 4 days later, you're cutting. Yeah, it's 25% moisture. The wheat is 25% moisture. You've got a wet bin. You're dumping it in there. The grain dryer is running through. And wheat dries much faster than corn does because it's a finer grain. So you run that wheat through there at 4, 5, 600 bushels an hour. You're combining. I've got an 1,800 bushel wet bin that I can put it in, and the combines can go, and that dryer can run all night long, and I won't care because I got from 10 o'clock to 8 o'clock, from 10 to 8 to combine, and I need to get off, say, anywhere from 300 to 600 acres of wheat. 300 to 600 acres of wheat. Yeah, 300 to 600 acres. If it was just 300 acres, I'd probably just use the one combine. But I'm looking at possibly doing the full 600 acres of wheat. I got 650 plus acres of wheat out there. But there's a few that have grass in it, and I'm not even worried about it. I'm going to see what happens when we come out of the spring. If there's wheat that doesn't look like it's worth a shit, then I'll just roll it down with the VT when it heads and plant corn through it. So usually here, the wheat starts to turn at about the 8th or 9th of June. The 8th or 9th of June. So you take the 8th or 9th of June. We can plant corn here until about the 20th of June. You get a shorter season, like a 92 day or 86 day. I got an 86 day variety here that did very well. Planted on the 30th of June. So you spray it on the 8th or the 9th of June. You got the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, right? 13th, you go in there, that's 4 days later. You can start harvesting about 3-4 days later when you use the right harvest aid with the right surfactant. The surfactant is going to be ammonium sulfate, a lot of ammonium sulfate. You really, really, really want to get that, to burn that, not burn it, but to actually put it, put that glufosinate, or whatever the hell they want to call that, Liberty herbicide, Lightning, Liberty, whatever. You can spray that on. It works a lot like Gramoxone, but it does kill the roots, so you're in good shape there. That's also a burn down. You can use that as a burn down for the incoming cash crop, and that's where you go. Now, if I get into it and we get a rainstorm and it gets to be the 20th or the 25th of June and it's too late to put corn in, I can still put beans in till about the 4th of July here and get 30-40 bushels to the acre. Or I can just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to use this opportunity to plant a multi-species cover crop for the corn that I'm going to plant next year. So yeah, we got a lot of things going on. But that's what I'm going to do with this wheat, is I'm going to turn it. There's a neighbor up the road who's probably watching this right now and thinking, hey, why didn't I think of that? Because he puts soybeans in as late as like the 15th of July, and sometimes he wins pretty good, but sometimes he loses. And this year, I don't know whether I don't talk to him anymore, but he had beans that were just as green and growing as could be, and I can't imagine that those soybeans were anything more than birdshot going through the combine. But it doesn't matter. It's not my business, and I don't really care. But I often wondered why he didn't use a harvest aid. It just didn't make any sense to me. But to each their own. I'm going to use a harvest aid, and I'm going to get that corn and or beans in a timely fashion. I will have 2 corn planters. I've purchased I haven't quite finalized the deal yet, but it's a John Deere 7000 12-row folding corn planter that is, in decent shape with liquid applicators. I will be then spraying my secret sauce directly over top of the row, which will be a more concentrated form right where I want it, and it has insect applicators there where I will be putting down a pelletized lime right over that row. So if you didn't know, corn likes calcium a lot. The pH is not quite as important with corn as you would think, because corn, in a healthy microbiological balanced soil, adjusts the pH itself. It will adjust its pH. I learned that and I thought, but you have to have at least a 6.4 or a 6.5 pH for it to do that. So corn can actually sweeten the soil to its liking in its root zone, and it can sour the soil to its liking in a root zone. The reason you don't want to get over 7 pH isn't because the plant can't adjust. It's because the herbicide will work either too well or not very good. Depends on the herbicide that you're using. Contact herbicides, it doesn't matter. So if you have a heavy residue or biomass that's laid over top of, laid down, and your corn can canopy, right? Your corn canopies pretty quickly when it's in a healthy biologically balanced soil. It grows quickly. It canopies quickly. That suppresses weeds. You can get away with mostly just contact herbicides. What I'm going to do is actually do my burn down this year, and then I'm going to monitor these fields with, just going to go out and monitor the fields to make sure that I can very easily, before they canopy, see what kind of weeds are emerging, and then go through with atrazine or bicep, or dual and atrazine is bicep, which I can spray on both corn and, dual on beans, but I don't know how many beans I'm going to. Are you going to behave yourself?
Yeah.
You better behave yourself, because I'm going to tell you something. You are being mean to Lola, and we don't do that.
Okay.
I'm going to get her a stick and she'll whack you. So anyway, yes, I'm going to just use a contact herbicide to burn down, plant through that biomass that is then laid down, suppressing the weed population that I may or may not have, because certain weeds, including mare's tail, need a temperature of about 100 to 120 degrees to germinate. So when you have that biomass over the top, keeps the soil cool, you won't have the weed pressure that you would normally think you would have. So it's going to be burn down, watch, and then go through with my bicep or whatever I'm going to put down after post-emergence. Because pre-emerging atrazine, I'm telling you, it's a waste of time. It just doesn't have the time to get in there, and you want that benefit of that little bit of burn down that you're going to get with. And you can add glyphosate or Liberty or Lightning to that to catch any of the missed or emerged weeds that are up already growing. You can incorporate atrazine before you plant, but I'm not into that. Because I'm not going to be tilling the soil. I'm just going to be VTing or just crumbling the top layer. But anyways, I think I've talked on enough about this in Ag Talk and Raw. So you guys have a great day, and I hope to see you on the next one.